bring, did you happen to bring copies of Scott's stuff up here for the evaluation?
Okay, we're back in session. Single copy if you want.
Oh, I've got it down there.
I got a copy, a single copy that I can get him to sign for both of them.
I'm just gonna get an extra. Never know.
Have you seen it? Did we send it to you?
What's that?
Your evaluation?
No.
Okay. You're about to see it then.
Nice. It's all right.
All right, we're back in session. We're meeting with the Wellness Complex Event Center, and first part of the meeting we'll talk about, not in detail about your budget, but what the expectations are as the commissioners have had visits with every department. We kind of have a spill that we give everybody. And after we do the budget, then we'll go into your evaluation stuff.
Great.
So I'll turn some time over to John.
So, I'm sure you've watched some of the videos. We're pretty much telling everybody the same thing initially. And so that is number one, is keep spending flat. No increase in spending in the overall budget. You can increase in certain areas if you can find other places to move money and that type of thing. And then, of course, there are other ways to generate extra money. And so we would encourage you to look at your processes, see if there's any cost savings that can be found by doing things a little bit differently. Look at grants, fees. Of course, in your case, you guys have an ability to generate revenue, so the ways you can generate increased revenue would be good. We've talked about, I don't know how much training is done up there, but we have talked about doing training, if you can, in-house rather than going out and hiring trainers and that type of thing. And one of the things we talked about also was succession planning, and to ensure that in your position and any critical positions in your department, that there's a succession plan in place, that if you were suddenly to be gone for whatever reason, other people could step in, whether it's another person or other people could take on the functions that you're doing that are critical, and look at everyone in the operation and make sure you have either cross-training or shadowing or whatever, however you're going to do that. And that's it.
Awesome.
Okay, do you have questions?
Nope. To just speak to the first line of trying to keep spending flat, that is typically our goal coming into every budget year, is to try to stay within our own footprint, and this year's no different. We're evaluating a couple of big, I guess some decent sized changes. We've currently used, or for the last couple of years, we've used the female inmates, the work crew, to come out and do some work for us. We have a contract through, I think it's through June, but their contract rates have risen pretty substantially. And so we're really going to evaluate to see if we can knock out some of the projects that we were having them do in-house to try to create some vacancy savings, and either reduce the amount of time that we use them. Instead of using them 5 days a week, from May to September, we may use them a couple of days a week, and try to have them hit specific programs. But that's something that we'll evaluate as a way to try to save a little bit of cost both this year and next year. They are a huge benefit to us. We don't want to lose them, but with some of the increases in it, there's really a debate within our team whether we can hire temporary staff, part-time, temporary, seasonal, at a cost savings. So those are some things that we're evaluating in our current budget, and that we'll initiate that this year. And so by budget season, we actually should have a better game plan for that. So
Well, that's good to know for the landfill also.
yeah, and I know we've talked about that. I talked to Kyle a little bit about the rate increases. I mean, it's the cost of. I don't think that there's. I definitely don't feel like there's any like they're trying to take advantage of anybody. I think that it just costs more to bring people out, and so. But that for me, it might be worthwhile to hire somebody. If I can hire a couple of temporary seasonal people to come help out around the complex for $15 an hour, that might be a more realistic thing than for the landfill to hire 12 people for that same cost, you know. So that's something that we're currently looking at in our budget. I know the last couple of years, we've really looked at the maintenance cost. I think this year, with how harsh the weather is going to be, I mean, we're definitely going to be taking a big hit of our maintenance budget. I think we're going to be tighter this year than we've been in years past because of some of the impacts of just the weather on our facilities. But we'll evaluate that. And then our vehicle maintenance, I think that we're going to have a more accurate picture of that moving forward than we have in the last couple of years.
Are you gonna have any additional maintenance on the covered arena this year with the issues you've had there?
Yeah, so that's on our discussion for Wednesday.
Okay.
I gotta give a hand to our guys. They got up there in that lift, and not only did they fix that critical error with the bracing that came undone, but they were actually able to kind of secure the tarp, and there was a couple tears in the tarp. They actually secured the tarp, and it looks and feels a lot better. There is an opportunity that, again, is probably a better long-term solution than short-term with the sprinkler system that we'll talk about with Chase on Wednesday. We haven't explored the path of cost yet, but in the long run, it's a much better solution, we believe.
Okay.
So, and the cost of repairing what we have is going to be pretty substantial, just due to unless ICRIM chips in, it's going to be pretty substantial because it froze down into into the well area, the stop and
the main
the main.
where it came out of the ground. Actually, luckily we caught it. Thank goodness. It froze there too and broke a buckle, so we almost had round 2 of what we would have had. Luckily we caught it and shut off, but there's a lot more than I think meets the eye with that.
Yeah, it's a more substantial damage this year. So, but I think we have a good solution moving forward. There's some engineering that needs to be done first, and then we can get a cost, and in the long run, much better.
Okay.
So, and I know you guys have kind of talked a little bit about succession planning and some of our fees, and I know you've asked a few folks about like a 5-year plan, to come with a 5-year plan. I just wanted to take a second, if we have a minute, to go over our 3-year plan that was created 2 years ago. And just to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done. You can see I haven't changed this, even though I'd like to edit some things out. But one of the goals that we had was to increase the facility use by 25%. The way that we track that is just in revenues collected, right? We just track that through revenues collected. And I went back historically and checked, like in 2019, from April 4th to April 4th, I just took a calendar year, we generated up at the complex $204,000. In 2018, we collected $191,000. In 2020, which we know is the COVID year, obviously our revenue collection was down a little bit to 163. And then I took over in May, right about this time. I started doing work up there of 2021. So from 2021 to 2022, we bumped up to $279,000 a year. And then this year so far, we're at $285,000. So, and that includes a month of revenue that we lost from the indoor arena, right? Not necessarily the expenses, but just the lost revenue. And so when we look at like our top goal, and really it's a lot of our goals, is to increase facility use by 25%, increase RV use by 20%. Really, if you lump those few things together, what we've done is we've actually increased the revenue on a 3-year average from 2019 through 2020 of $181,000 a year to a 2-year average of what we've been doing of $281,000 a year. We've increased the revenue by about a 30% increase in revenue. So I feel like we're meeting the goal. Now, some of that comes through more activities, right? You guys know it's busy up there. And if our facilities aren't in the shape that we want them to be in, we lose out on some of those activities. And so really, a lot of it goes to Jake and his team to keep our facilities in good working conditions. But then also to get out and try to find more business to come to us. The other thing that we've done, and I think you guys are probably aware of this, is we locked up all of our horse stalls. We locked up all of our RV spots. If you want to stay, we need to know about it, and you got to pay. And that has put a huge inconvenience upon our friends to the north in Canada that for years have driven through our facilities and stalled horses and stayed for free. And we've heard that they're staying in Oneida County in Malad. As a matter of fact, we had an official from Malad come up talk to us a couple weeks ago, asking us how we generate revenue off of horse stalls and what they can do to stop free horse stall use. And so anyway, let me just tell you, it's combo locks and cell phones for our folks. That's how we do it. But I think that has been a way that we've really been able to impact this. Now, moving forward, there are some areas on here, like we talked about doing multi-year contracts with people to try to help us generate revenue. And then that also allows us to go out and talk to sponsors and say, look, these are the events that we have. These are how many people are going to be in our seats. And we have a few folks that we've run multi-year contracts. Obviously, we choose 1-year contracts with a few people to try it out. But I still think that's a viable option. Now, with concerts and events in the future, the 4th of July, specifically fireworks, and also production services for our concerts, I think there's a substantial cost savings if we do a multi-year contract. I talked to both the provider for the fireworks. Those services are only getting more expensive, right? The cost of fireworks is just going up. And the production services, as concerts continue to pop up all over the region, those services just get a little more expensive too. And so by doing a multi-year contract with both of those, we might be able to see a decrease in saving, or an increase in savings, decrease in costs that could really benefit the county long run. So this year we've got both those services wrapped up, but next year as we start working towards RFPs on both the fireworks and the production services, we'll want to look at multi-year options. I heard you talk a little bit with the Fair Board about trying to find ways to do 4-season events, and that was one of the goals that we had for our complex. We talked about doing a polar plunge, and we actually had ISU sign the contract to come do it, and then they didn't end up showing up for the polar plunge. But to be honest with you, there's a few ways I think we could generate some revenue, and it's a hard one, but like we get some serious ice fishermen out there, and I think that we could possibly look at partnering with Idaho Fish and Game if we found some good days in the winter and running an ice fishing tournament or something like that out there. That would be a fun event.
I saw somebody post the other day, and I mean, they had a nice fish.
Yeah.
I mean, it was,
There's some big
Well,
ones.
Fish and Game will go out there and
Is that a
stock
fish
it with
story?
some monsters.
it was a fish
So,
story.
That's a
They
good
had
one.
video evidence.
So, and then also the riding passes has been really a success for us. We have a lot of people that come rent those riding passes. A couple of years ago, you remember instead of having a year riding pass, we went to a 6-month riding season, right? And it's really just kind of from that November or October to April, time frame. And we've had a lot of people that have enjoyed the riding passes. And I think that's just a success to that program.
No longer have lifetime passes.
We do not have lifetime passes, but we do have people that come back year after year to pick up those passes. So one of the things that we had talked about in this 3-year plan also was to reduce county-sponsored events and to really look at not reducing the events, but reducing the county's obligation to sponsor those events. I feel like we've kind of stepped away from that a little bit with our concerts, but I feel like that's the best option for us moving forward this time. Obviously, our team is new to sponsors. We've gone out and met with a lot of people. I know when we initially talked with a previous group that we had that made a lot of promises to us, they had talked about $1 million sponsorships and all this stuff. Our experience is the region doesn't necessarily support that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that we won't continue to go out and talk to people. We'll do so, but we also don't want to, burn the folks that have helped us in the community by asking for something that's not realistic or trying to promise something that's not reasonable. part of our 3-year plan was to increase professionalism with our staff through leadership training, staff uniforms, a better scheduling model for the work that they do, and then having really well-defined job responsibilities and job roles. I do feel like we are increasing. I think our professionalism is gone up quite a bit. When we talk about succession planning, our world's a tough one, but I think it's something that we can really try to be proficient at. And I feel like I've got 2 great leaders that work with me, in addition to a lot of other leaders that work for us as well. But I've got 2 people that are very knowledgeable in their line of work, and it's times it seems like they're opposite ends of the spectrum, right? We've got events, and then we have facilities. But the reality is I've got to try to meld those 2 together and get them to where they both have a good working knowledge of both areas, all areas of the facility. And so I welcome that challenge of trying to do a lot of that stuff in-house too. So as far as my report on the 3-year plan, I think that we can kind of keep using this as a roadmap moving forward. But is there anything that you guys would like to see added to or changed on that?
I want you to focus on the bottom there, reduce county-sponsored events where possible. Your people are busy, and they have regular jobs, and to have them come in and try to be the whole sponsor of an event is, it takes months of their time to do something that, if somebody else is willing to sponsor something or wants an event, I'm all in favor of using our facility, letting other people utilize it, and us not have to be the center of everything there.
Yeah, I like that as well. I think it allows us to be a support. We can capitalize on some of that stuff too. As we look at contracts where we can either sell concessions or sell alcohol, where we can have a support role in those things but still generate a little bit of revenue, I think that's going to be a huge benefit to us.
Well, I look at Hold Arena, and it isn't the staff that comes in and runs the events. They prep for it and stuff like that, but they don't run the events. And we don't have that many people either that we can be running events every weekend up there.
Sure.
Your people, we gotta have consideration for our people. They gotta have some time with their families too.
Yeah, and like we talked about yesterday, if you could, I know we talked about you coming back in a couple of weeks, but if you could add that, how you think about moving the fields and
Yes.
everything around, I think that would be a good part of this.
Yeah, I actually kind of talked to our team today about it, and to be honest with you, I like that exercise because I feel like it is. It could be a 3-year plan, but it also could be a 1-year. It could be something that happens fast,
Right.
and so I want to have something in place so we can kind of forecast any sort of action that we need to take. I just want to have a plan in place.
Yeah.
But I like at least some of the brainstorming that we've come up with. I like the idea of doing that.
And I shared with both commissioners a little bit of our discussion, so
Mhm.
if you could include that and then come back in a few weeks or when you're ready and
Sure.
talk about that.
And I just want to have a few more conversations with some folks
Yeah.
that from a feasibility standpoint to see logistically what it would look like. But I think that right now on paper it looks good.
Okay.
So, any other questions or concerns about the plan moving forward?
Budget? Anything on budget? You got more on budget?
The only thing I would say to you on budget is next year, and this is going to be a lot more for when we meet with Christie. Obviously, the way we'll do the event budget is we'll have to have more spending authority, but not necessarily more money, right? So we're going to spend the same money multiple times throughout that calendar year, throughout that budget year. An example is concessions. If we buy $50,000 in concessions and we sell that, we'll generate roughly $150,000 in revenue, which would then go back into buying the next set of concession for the next, it might be, a couple concerts down, but really, that $50,000 investment could get you through the entire year as you kind of gain that revenue back. So as we're looking at our projections, we're really looking at not increasing our spending, but increasing how much we would spend on that item, right? So we may spend, if we ran 8 shows and we spent $50,000 on concessions each show, which again, I'm kind of using some just general math, but if we had 7,500 people come to a show, each person bought $20 in concessions, that's $150,000, that's $50,000 in hard costs. So if we replicate that for 8 shows, that's $400,000. So we just have to have the ability to spend a little bit, probably a little bit more than $400,000 for the year in concessions, even though the total cash out of pocket at any given time might only be $50,000. So we just have to have the spending authority to do it over and over and over again.
What's your current spending authority?
It's just straight up the budget. So we took the $2 million and we kind of put $1 million, roughly $1 million into talent for concerts, and then we broke the rest of it up into contract services, and concessions was one of those items, and I know we lowballed it. So at some point, once we start the concerts and we can see what it's going to look like, we'll definitely have to come back and ask for more spending authority, because we're going to, hopefully, if we do our job right, we're going to exceed spending authority pretty quickly. Same thing with marketing, right? We set our marketing budget at $48,000 for the year because we were way overestimating what previous people had spent. The reality is our spending on marketing should be close to $20,000 per show, if not more, depending on the show. And so we'll spend more on marketing early, but again, that has a direct correlation to ticket sales. We can watch that stuff real time and see what ticket sales look like when we're hitting a good ad blast to see who it's reaching.
So do you have authority, if I'm understanding you correctly, your authority is based on what the budget is for the year, and that's
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have transaction authority per transaction. You don't have any authority to spend so much per transaction?
No, I don't have any transaction authority. I have I have authority to contract the total number of the budget that was allocated to me
Okay.
on that.
Yeah.
So I could spend, technically I could spend I could buy 1 big show or 20 small shows.
Right.
But as long as it doesn't exceed that amount.
Yeah, okay, we'll have to schedule a discussion to talk about transactional authority for these guys, I think.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm open to that too.
You should put together what you think you need so we can have that. You probably need us to have that meeting pretty quickly, I would imagine.
Well, I think this first fiscal year, we'll know through October, but this first year, we don't really have a clue. And even by the time we start doing our budget discussions for next year, which is going to be in June, we'll have run maybe 2 shows. And so it's going to be a little bit of guesswork for the first little bit until we should know by the end of the concert season, we should know exactly what we're going to look like.
But you'll need some of that this year, right?
We'll definitely have to come before you guys again and have some, they'll have to open it up or open the budget up to allow us to spend more.
I think you should calculate what authority you think you're going to need.
Okay.
We know this is our first try at this, but we probably should have that meeting and get that established at least for this case.
Yeah.
And then we can modify it next year.
I agree with that. We'll put something down.
I appreciate that.
Because one of the things I would like to do is honestly, we got started buying concerts a little bit late this year, and we're trying to overcome some venue concerns that people all throughout the industry have. And so it definitely hasn't been as easy as I would hope it had been. There's a lot of competition out there. So really what I'd love to be able to do is once we repurpose or we get that money back from the first few shows that we have run, I'd love to be able to start jumping on next year's lineup early. Hey, you got a chance to bring in this band, let's jump on them early. even though the money for that show wouldn't even be due until next year. You know, but I'd love to get an offer out and get some stuff.
Get a proposal together and
Okay.
we'll schedule a meeting.
Okay. All right.
Okay? Any further questions, budget-wise? Okay,
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion that we enter into executive code under Idaho, executive session under Idaho Code 74-2061 A and B. Want to give that to Scott?
Commissioner Crowder,
Yes.
Commissioner Lozier,
yes.
Commissioner Cobb.
Yes.